we want to definitely like discuss a little bit what's happening in the decentralized tech, you know, social graph, what's happening with Lens. I think you have some alpha, so big announcement for us. But let's start with like something like, yeah, quite easy. So what's happening into the decentralized web? What are the benefits? You know, why we need this? You know, this is quite straightforward, but yeah, you want to give us an overview on that?
Yeah, it's really exciting time to be in the space. I've been around for, I was just talking to Kevin Novoki that, you know, when he started Gitcoin, he had his daughter born, you know, and that was 6 years ago. And I've been in the space for, I think, 7 years now. And a lot of the infrastructure pretty much didn't exist. So a lot of the scalability is being built. You know, when I started, DeFi had, I don't know, 10, 20 users. So it's grown quite significantly. And there's a lot of innovation happening. And we have also non-financial use cases. And we're trying to solve also decentralized social networking. And we see a lot of interesting use cases now. And the biggest reason I'm super excited about decentralized technology is that a lot of this hard, complex infrastructure is starting to exist. And what it means is that once you have this infrastructure, you're going to see some interesting experiences as well, and applications and actually integrations into, I would say, real people's lives that are using different kinds of services on a day-to-day basis. So in somewhat, even the space has existed for quite a while, I kind of feel that it's a bit of like a personal computer era of the blockchain. So we have a lot of the computational hardware, we have a lot of solutions and infrastructure, and now what we're trying to do as in overall in the community is to build that personal computer and get blockchain into day-to-day usage of average people who are not in the space, but could actually benefit a lot what blockchain provides.
Yeah, I think the space, this is a great answer, right? I think the space evolved extremely, like you being around for quite a while. Like how many of you guys are using, you know, Aave on a daily basis, or you're like, you know, posting stuff on Lens all the time? I think quite a lot. Like, well, I'm interested to know, like, what are the lessons learned and challenges during that way? You know, what happens on that path? Like, what are lessons learned? Like, what are the challenges that we still have today that we need to solve?
DeFi is in a really good shape in the perspective that these protocols are holding quite significant worth of value. At the moment, we see a lot of innovation being built on top of the Aave Protocol. It's relatively easy to use. Uniswap is quite easy to use as well. So the kind of like a financial infrastructure is existing on the blockchain. And also with layer 2s, you actually see communities getting empowered and users being able to use these protocols with lower fees, exchange value, supply liquidity, and earn all the basic things that an economy needs. And I think our mission is more of growing the kind of a gross domestic product of on-chain economy. There's different ways to measure how you know the blockchain space is growing or how much value it creates. For some it's users. For some it's you know, the amount of integrations or some sort of capital that is in these pools. But what we kind of are looking at is that how much actually we see the trading happening in terms of products and goods and services that are reflected on chain. Because the whole idea about blockchain is that you can secure, you can bring integrity into pretty much any kind of a use case. And finding those use cases and then bringing these use cases on chain and then building that on-chain economy. I think that's where what's important for us, for example. And if there's an opportunity, usually for creating just better products and experiences, that will happen. And I think things are progressing quite significantly. Yeah.
No, I think like, speaking about growing and, optimizing infrastructure, you guys ship different, Aave versions. And I think, what are kind of like the differences, in Aave v3 that, compared what's happening in the ecosystem? What are the things like the kind of like design thinking behind that? I think I'm definitely interested to understand, like, because you guys rebuild the infrastructure almost from scratch, right? Yes. Like, it was quite amazing. I mean, I don't know how many people know, like, the amount, I think, of work on rebuilding a full infrastructure with already kind of like a driven like user base.
Yeah, it's significant, and that's the thing about these protocols is that they take significant effort to build, and also quite diligent process to audit them and formally verify. But that's the kind of like idea of DeFi. Once you build these systems that are self-executing and become public good, they will be beneficial to everyone who's interacting with these protocols. I mean, we did a lot of things wrong, especially in the beginning. So we've iterated quite a lot. So we started as ETHLend a few years ago, mainly kind of like from a peer-to-peer perspective of lending and borrowing, and we realized that you could actually scale this to a pooled model. But what we learned is that what is kind of like the average user of the Aave protocol, and how we can actually make most out of that experience. So that's why when we're making product decisions, which is interesting process at Aave, we don't really think about necessarily like how we can expand the protocol to serve new use cases, or how we can serve a new audience. But we're thinking is that how we can actually productize more for the main user, and then scale that main user category to wider. And I think that's for us very workable approach. And there's projects that are working on figuring out like how to create more, let's say, permissionless pools and kind of like solve different kinds of edge cases in DeFi, and making kind of like a more wholesome public good decentralized finance. But for us, it's more about how we can recognize our main user and just scale that and scale beyond like the early adopters of DeFi as well. So that's how we build stuff today.
No, that's really cool. Like also like mentioning that you're trying to build also this ecosystem of instruments. Like you recently launched also the stablecoin Go. I don't know if many of you guys dropped like for Aave, like was the Genesis. I think that was really cool. But you want to like mention a little bit like what's the thinking behind like driving or like let's say introducing a new stablecoin, and why is this difference? Yeah,
that's an interesting question. I think something we noticed quite early is that a lot of the stablecoin liquidity, obviously, it comes from the suppliers, and the interest rates are obviously regulated by the protocol itself, algorithmically. But we noticed that there is sometimes interest rate crunches in the Aave protocol, so there is not enough stable value that can be borrowed out of the protocol, where there's a big need for that. And obviously, when we're going back to what I was talking earlier, that when we're building to that average use case of the Aave protocol user, we're thinking of like how to make their life easier. So when you come to the protocol and the liquidity is expensive or it's not there, you obviously have you're not satisfying the user needs there. And that's where we basically started to build this idea that, what if we actually, because we have all these users of the protocol that are supplying these collaterals and they're earning at the same time, they could actually borrow a native stablecoin. And what that means is that typically when you're minting a stablecoin in DeFi, you're not necessarily earning any interest on that as collateral asset. So basically you can earn on your collateral while you're borrowing a stablecoin and mitigating your borrowing costs. So that was the kind of like idea there. And the way we build it is that we have this concept of facilitators. So each facilitator basically has a bucket that they can mint Go. And the first facilitator has been the Aave market, but the V3 market. So you can mint. Actually, you can't mint anymore because the borrow cat reached the ceiling. So, but I think you all know where to go if you need some. But what's interesting there is that with these facilitators, you can actually expand down the line how Go is minted. So it could be minted to the other lending protocols against real-world assets or other interesting collaterals down the line. And that all diversifies as well the whole DeFi infrastructure, because what our team has is kind of like the experience and the diligence to build this infrastructure. But from vision perspective, our aim is to get Go more into day-to-day usage. And payments is something that we're looking quite heavily, how we can get Go down the line into payments and everyday usage, and that way build the on-chain gross domestic product and grow that quite a lot. We're super interested about real-world assets, and it's really interesting that if users globally have access to off-chain assets, any type of yield instruments, but we're kind of like more interested like how we can actually get people to use stablecoins and settle transactions. And I'm actually quite happy because we dropped the Go Pass, which included a Aave ticket, some exclusive Go swag, and an NFT, and we had 300 people minting at 100 Go, which made 30,000 Go directly to the Aave DAO. So like people are willing in our community to pay and use stablecoins. We just need to figure out also reasons like how we get stablecoin usage more within our ecosystem, but also outside. And what could be those tools and experiences that could help on that?
Yeah, I think full decentralization and payments is definitely like the biggest use case right now. I'm quite interested to understand also like the Go stablecoin kind of ecosystem. Like you touched on like usability, obviously for users, but what developers can do? What's the opportunity for them to build? How many developers we have in the room? I mean, post launch, before launch. Okay, cool. Some. But what are the opportunity for those developers to build actually on Go or in the ecosystem itself?
I think it really depends on your kind of like a background and what you're aiming for. But I'm personally very excited about the kind of like a front end aspect of DeFi. So now that there's a lot of the infrastructure that I mentioned out there, what's actually missing is building those like consumer facing use cases and applications and making it just super simple to use Go in normal transactions and finding ways of improving the experience. And I think being able to do that, that's actually a very exciting way to build also businesses on top of the decentralized financial infrastructure. And I think that's where things become interesting because you're actually then owning kind of like the end user and the end user experience, but on the back end, you're using these decentralized protocols at the same time. And I think if you look back, like how internet evolved, internet started to evolve quite heavily, when the businesses came online. So when you could actually buy a book, that wasn't available in your local bookstore or your library, and you can get it shipped in somewhere part of the world. You can order other kinds of goods as well, or you can buy services online. And this element evolved into having payment methods like PayPal, a good example of early payment method, and obviously Stripe. But you can see that if you are able to facilitate some of these business opportunities and build that way the on-chain gross domestic product by supplying goods and services and making it grow on-chain, I think that's a really interesting path and build businesses and finding product market fit. And I think we have to be like very kind of like serious and really mature when we build things. I really love hackathons and seeing like the creativity that the developers are putting into experiencing with the technology. But I'm personally like even more excited to see like building actual consumer-facing businesses on top of decentralized technology and showing that you can actually build a business and find product market fit, or at least try before pivoting to AI, and then and just keep building things that consumers want and find helpful, build on top of DeFi.
What are the kind of imminent use case that we should start building? You know, we're preparing for the next market. You know, any specific use case that you see they should be built on DeFi?
I think anywhere, even where you need some sort of like a payment element, yield component, asset swap component, and integrating that even to an existing like an application that already exists. You know, I could imagine someone rebuilding the whole kind of like a new email client where you can have this monetization layer, which is powered by stablecoins and the blockchain, and also Web3 social. So it doesn't necessarily need to be commerce, but it can be just you improve existing products and make it more interesting for the users, and create a new market. Actually, there's tons of products there that we all use daily that really aren't good, so there's plenty of opportunities there.
Oh, sounds good. And if you guys are building something, mentioned here, definitely speak with Stani later, also with the Aave team. They're all around. But yeah, so let's you touch on, social graphs. What's the status today on decentralized socials? I think everybody of us is using somehow Lens. But what do you think are the challenges? I'm playing a little bit the devil advocate. Do we get adoption? I see stuff like Forecaster, bunch of decentralized social. Are we there yet, or what do we need? What are the challenges?
I think on the social side, so we're progressing more in the infrastructure. So where DeFi is more infrastructure ready, and now figuring out to go more consumer and more application. I think in Web3 social, we're more in the infrastructure, and where Lens comes into play is that we basically build different kinds of social networking primitives that developers can use on building new experiences. And I think what we had recently and talking about for the past year, we've been building Lens for the past couple of years, and I would say that we're in a kind of like a hello world moment in Web3 social, meaning that we're building experiences that we have some we're used to as end users. So we've seen a lot of, for example, applications that are related to microblogging, blogging in general, photo sharing. Those are the typical things, or videos and short clips and so forth. Those are the things that we see, for example, on Lens and across the Web3 social space. And now kind of we're moving towards that in a place where we're thinking that once the infrastructure is there, we could actually start thinking of whole new experiences. And the big difference here comes is that with the blockchain and Lens, the monetization comes as a default. So everything you build actually has a direct monetization. And it's quite interesting because what attracted to me to build applications online in the first place is that you have this idea of being able to also earn on what you build. And I remember I was 14, 15 years old when I created a web page, put some ads there from Google, and got my first paycheck from Google, right? So that's really cool. Or when you're building mobile applications, games or whatnot, and you get payments, for example, from the App Store as well, from Apple, and so forth. And these intermediaries, they take extremely high cut in terms of whatever you produce. And that cut really is something where you as a user don't have a choice, or a builder actually even more. So you're giving away a lot what you create. And I think with Lens Protocol and Web3 Social, the idea is that you can give guarantees to the developers and the end users. For the developers, the guarantees are basically what are the maximum fees that are on the protocol level, and then guarantees that you can actually earn and share fees with other applications and whoever is building on this same social shared network. And then for the end user guarantees is that you have your profile, you own your audience with your followers, and you can even earn from the content that you're actually creating, and the integrity comes by the on-chain smart contract, which for example Lens protocol heavily relies. And we use data availability as well. So the thing is that we don't only have a on-chain protocol, but it uses different kinds of decentralized technologies. So data availability for storing content, for example, decentralized storage, and then on-chain for whenever you want to create monetization or ownership that basically is secured by the network itself. And these are just primitives, so eventually developers should be able to choose which of primitives they want to use. So maybe they just need handles, on-chain handles for the use case, or they need something else. Maybe they need on-chain posts that can be collected. And for us, we have a big milestone because today, finally, we were able to migrate the version 1 of the Lens protocol to version 2. And the coolest thing about this is that the protocol is composable. So effectively, you can create content on Lens and create so-called smart posts or open actions where you can have an action that is from another protocol, so directly on your feed. So you can, for example, donate or contribute to Gitcoin directly on your feed. You can mint an NFT on Ethereum network directly on your feed or other networks, and do a bunch of interesting, cool things just by putting the composability together between networks.
Yeah, I think for me always the big value proposition was like you're retaining your kind of like matrix itself. Like if you as users you have like for the first time some kind of interoperability between platform, but you are the one that actually owning this kind of like track record, and you can share it so you're not starting from scratch. I think this is like a big also value proposition around decentralized social media, but also on a protocol level, what you guys are doing.
And you can still start from scratch. So what was our first kind of step is to build a like a shared social graph. So we have like a public good graph. And then from there, you can still create your own graph. So if you're building something really interesting and you want to specifically curate your user base and the audience, you can still do that. So that's basically our vision from the Lens V2, that you can choose. So there's more choice for the developers, but also for the end users, how they want to actually engage with the protocol, what to build.
Yeah, look, Lens 2.0. Do we want to applaud this? Because I think a lot of like work has been done to build, and to reiterate.
Thank you.
So nice. So like in terms of like the developers. So what how developers can interact now with 2.0? You kind of like already anticipated a little bit, but what are the things that we can continue to build on the 2.0 version?
I think kind of like. I'm always looking for new experiences and simplicity, especially that, like, because social is very broad range, and social applications, they don't really need to be super apps. In fact, I would rather see like more kind of like a narrow use cases and something more fun being built than kind of like solving the whole decentralization aspect and building like a more of a super app. So what I think is interesting to see is just like a very quick, small experiences, focusing on one interesting thing, making it very fun, and having monetization there. And I do think that in Web3, we're very hesitant to monetize on a protocol level, on an app level. Obviously, there's a big discussion about Uniswap putting the fees on the application level. In Aave's example, we had always protocol fees, but there's no application fees. But I kind of like would like to see that all these builders, that they actually start monetizing for day one. And the reason for that is that you start to actually see what people are willing to pay. And that's a really high signal of understanding whether people like your product and are willing to pay for it and how much they're willing to pay. And that gives you understanding about product market fit and whether there is PMF. And these applications, they don't really need to be the end goal. So you might have, that might be your first out of 3 experiments that you want to build. You know, and you could ship like an experiment every few months. And our goal is to make, from the Lens protocol perspective, as easy as possible to use these primitives to monetize and bootstrap audience, and from that shared social graph. And I've been personally helping a lot of people to actually figure out what to build. And if you have any interesting ideas, I will be happy to help and brainstorm.
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit in the panel before on developer tooling around, you know, how we need to actively hear the community and build together. And I think like you guys have been very consistent also, like, you know, not just in developer activation, but being always there where the ecosystem is. Like, you want to touch a little bit, you know, what are the things, like what are lessons learned, you know, why getting, you know, consistently like community feedback is important to build a product?
Oh, it's super important. But there's also one distinction, is that community feedback is not the same as user feedback. So community might be super unhappy about something, whereas user might be super happy. Or user might not mind at all what the community minds. So I do think both are important. And it usually for some reason, for obvious reasons, usually like Web3 projects, they start by building a community first. But I will even go as far as thinking purely about the user, what you're building, what's important, what's the average user type, how much they're willing to pay, if they're willing to pay. And then forming the community out of those users. And then everything else is attached and having fans. I would even say that what I would focus is just building fans that love your product and are using your product. I think that's even better than building a community of people who are interested in what you're doing and following the progress. By just basically building a user base that really love what you're doing and are willing to pay for the experience.
Yeah, you guys prepped some spicy questions, right? We're getting to this. My last question is a little bit like, you know, what are the long-term incentives, you know, for you know, we obviously like, we obviously think about, you know, community incentives and stuff, but how you really truly build this kind of, you know, 360 incentives for having a strong community, a strong user base that actively participate in building the product itself?
Yeah, it's incentives are always hard, right? Because we always talk about incentives in the space, and you know what you should do basically, whether to add loyalty points. That's very interesting. Actually, like one of the biggest loyalty points programs, you know, are Starbucks. So a lot of people know Starbucks, right? A curious question, like who thinks that the Starbucks product is good? Just okay. What about who thinks it's not good? I think if we do anonymous voting, we get more results.
No, I think they really like nailed down probably like the marketing side, but on the technical side, I don't know if, you know, is truly believe, you know, in Web3 incentivization. That's the only thing, right?
Yeah, I do think there's always some sort of incentives or a reason for someone to use a product. But basically, I do think that the incentive should be that they need the product and it solves something for them. You know, it solves a problem or gives them some sort of excitement. And then, you know, for developers, incentives to build is purely, you know, fees. Being able to make people to pay for the product. And I think it's also important because end of the day, we're competing from the same user base as the non-Web3 companies as well, and building products. And the more we go to consumer, you know, the more we have to rely on building good products, because the community aspect, it might be less relevant at that point. And then kind of like, I think personally, like fees are great incentive, but also like being able to recognize your early users and figuring out how to reward them is also beneficial. But I just think that designing loyalty programs, for example, for users, it's very tricky because it might distract you to think that people use the product because they like it, and it's useful for them, but they might be there, for for basically the point systems, and that's why I kind of like recommend to start thinking about what users are willing to pay, and from there building revenue early.
Yeah, 100%. I think like you touch on kind of like long-term incentives. I also think like you really need to have kind of like solid down-to-earth metrics to come back to the company and kind of like assimilate on a good terms, right? Because I think like metrics in terms of numbers sometimes is not the right way, right? You can build experiential and very impactful activation and still have a much more success. And that's super interesting.
And I also think that kind of like the main like meta incentive is always like the vision that you have. Like our vision is to build the people-powered internet. So effective, that's like a wide mandate of building things where we can make the internet more balanced. Less power for the big companies, and more power for the users, more power for the decentralized communities as well, and make the internet a better place. But we still think companies will have a good market fit to build services even on top of the decentralized infrastructure. But they need to now compete for the users because the users have more choice. They have more power and control in that way. So in some ways, like that personal incentive is the vision that you might have and why you're here today.
Cool. I think we can get some questions. I mean, we touched on like socials, Lens 2.0, V2, Aave V3. Like there is quite good. Like any question from the public? I think on the back there near the camera. Do we have a running mic going around?
Thank you. I'm Senat. Stani, great talk. Thanks for sharing your insight. Francesco, great job leading it. My question would be, and you sort of touched it at the end, that it almost sounds like there needs to be a big shift in terms of mindset, that we have to be more product-focused, product-led, and sort of consumer-satisfying. What would, like, if you could grade the current state of our ability to do that, right? Identifying like ecosystem needs and building products and projects aligned with that. From 1 to 10, if 10 was excellent and 1 was really bad, how good are we currently, and what needs to be done in order to improve that?
I think the fact that we're here talking about this is already like the good path forward. But I think we're very far away where we should be in terms of building products that are better than, let's say, non-Web3 products. And it's also because we don't have all the resources in the space yet. Like we have incredible engineers. We've been able to build a decentralized financial system. We've been able to build interesting technology on the L2s with ZKs. So kind of like the smart contract, the EVM part, the network part, and the backend talent is really, really good in the space. I think kind of like where we're still lacking is to get more designers into the space, and focusing a lot on the UX, more UX engineers. And I think that's a kind of like a gap that we have at the moment. So, we have to put a lot of effort to just build more consumer-friendlier products, but also products that relate to these consumers. So we're very early at this stage, and that's why I like to always like refer to the personal computer era, because we're still not even in the kind of like a .com boom pad, because we don't really have that many applications. But we're still building that personal computer, where you have mouse and where you have Windows as well, and it's that early. And I think for me it resonates because we could do things way better, and I think we're in the right path, but it's very early.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The evolution is quite it's impressive, right? But I still think like we are very product let's say centric. we have very product-centric GTMs, and I think also we need to shift to like very community-centric GTM in the same time, right? That the big difference is also like how you build what is happening around the product, how you kind of nurture and get feedback from the ecosystem itself, from like partners and everything. So I think.
And the users should be the community end of the day, and we shouldn't be afraid of like building better products. These protocols exist, and it's up to us to build something really, really good. And it's getting better. And some applications they have a lot of users. There's a lot of risk involved to improve and change code bases on even application side. So I think the path is right for sure.
This is the quote of the day. We shouldn't be afraid to build better products. I think this is really cool. Cool. Any last question? Let's take one question. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Mastodon and the Fediverse? Where do you see Web3 social in 5 years versus federated networks?
I think it's great that there's a lot of initiatives at the moment, Mastodon, ActivityPub, and which are basically building towards decentralized social. And end of the day, it's all about giving the user choice. And I think they should exist. And I do think everyone kind of like needs still to find those new experiences, because we can't build experiences that already exists. Twitter works pretty well, even if it's not decentralized, but it's hard to replicate from a like a decentralization point of view. But I also think that blockchain has and data availability has a lot of benefits. So you can actually build guarantees not just for the user, but for the actual developers and everyone who is building on the same graph, and give those guarantees, because blockchain brings the integrity, and then kind of like a data availability is a very neat way to actually get scale. In a way that you have that integrity on information. And I think federated models are also great, especially when you build like server type of architecture where you have multiple servers and each server is a community of sorts. But I'm being very happy of the architectural choices we made, because one of the important things about social is the actual monetization aspect, and how everything runs, because now there's a lot of monetization in social media. We as users aren't just getting it. So it streams from the platform to advertisers and from the people who are consuming or paying for verifications. But there is no integrity on how those payments are distributed, or guarantees for the payments itself. So yeah, I'm super happy where we're going, but it's definitely a years of work, and on a protocol level, it's going to be a long game. On an application level, it really depends of smart people like you all here to build something very cool and exciting, on top of Lens, of course.
Cool. I think that was the best closing, huh? But thanks, Stani, for your time, and a big round of applause. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you.